Hey, up 2-1. That's a loose cannon. He's up 2-1.
Why did you go for 4 times?
Tony, can you please shut up?
So for the first time all night, E-Dub has some money in his pocket. Now, can he keep it?
Gotta be kidding me. Come on.
Phil Hellmuth has won more World Series of Poker bracelets than any human being alive. 17 of them. He has sat across from every world champion, every high-stakes legend, every poker genius the game has ever produced. And he has never, not once in his entire career, stopped telling everyone about it. So when PokerStars sat him down for the very first episode of a brand new show, opposite an amateur who nobody in the poker world had ever heard of, the pros in the room expected one thing, and one thing only: an easy payday. What they got instead was the single most legendary televised poker hand ever filmed, and the beginning of a meltdown that Phil Hellmuth, 17 bracelets and all, has never fully recovered from. Meet Ernest Wiggins. No tournament wins, no sponsorships, no coach, no crew, no training regimen. Just a guy from Washington, D.C. who started playing poker for one reason, and one reason only. He once dated a woman who played professionally, and when the relationship ended, the habit stuck. He wasn't a grinder. He wasn't an online pro. He played in local home games around D.C., where by his own account, he was, quote, somewhat successful. He had 7 nicknames at the table: DC, E-Dub, Tennessee, Bly, Quay, Boo, and June Bug, and not a single tournament cash to his name. PokerStars handed him $100,000 as part of their brand new loose cannon promotion and dropped him into the first episode of The Big Game, one of the most talked about high-stakes cash games ever broadcast on American television. What followed was not just the first episode of a television show, it was the night a delivery from a DC home game got Phil Hellmuth all in as an 85% favorite in a $200,000 pot, and walked away with most of it. It was the night Phil Locke, the Unabomber, led the entire table in laughing at the poker brat while he sat there frozen. It was the night a man who had never played a tournament in his life became the first loose cannon in big game history to book a profit. Let's get into it. The loose cannon format is simple in theory and brutal in practice. PokerStars picks an amateur, stakes them $100,000, and drops them into a cash game against 5 professional killers. Whatever the amateur wins above the original $100,000 is theirs to keep. Lose it all, and they go home with nothing. The blinds are $200 and $400 with a $100 ante. 150 hands, pot limit before the flop, so the amateur can't just go all in blind. No limit after. And Ernest Wiggins wasn't just the first loose cannon of the week. He was the first loose cannon in the show's history. No template, no previous episode to learn from, no one to ask what it's like. He was the guinea pig. The table waiting for him is as stacked as it gets.
Daniel Negreanu, Kid Poker has left the kid gloves at home. He brings with him instead $200,000.
The Hall of Famer Doyle Brunson, a 2-time main event winner, starts off with $100K.
Phil Locke, the Unabomber cash game specialist, also brings with him $100,000.
The Aussie poker media mogul Tony G starting off with $100,000 tonight.
And in seat 6, the poker brat Phil Hellmuth. He's claimed he's reformed. Let's see what he does with his $100,000.
5 pros, 1 amateur, 150 hands, and the session opens with exactly the kind of moment that sets a tone. Pre-flop action. Daniel Negreanu wakes up with the second best starting hand in poker. Pocket kings.
First action on Daniel, who's got kings. Raises to 1,200. Action folds around to Tony G. Ace-9 suited, makes the call.
You like that button, huh? That's your favorite thing.
Well, I've got 600 in there. I mean, right? How can I fold?
Wiggins looks down at the big blind with Ace-King, a premium hand. And for a man playing his very first pot on national television, he does the exact thing you'd expect a seasoned pro to do. He raises. 3,700. Negreanu, sitting on the actual best hand at the table, 3 bets to 13,100. Tony G gets out of the way, and Wiggins, first televised pot of his life, makes the call.
Check to you, Daniel.
Okay, I'm probably gonna bet you, just saying.
You're gonna fire out off the flop.
Ernest is checked in the dark. Daniel will be first to act.
6-5-7 on the flop. No help to Ernest Wiggins.
It's usually my neighborhood over there, but I don't got none of that.
The way the betting went pre-flop, nothing scary about this board for Daniel. He's going to fire.
18.
Bet of 18,000 by Negreanu.
18,000 on a flop that completely misses ace-king. And here's the moment that tells you what kind of player Wiggins actually is. He doesn't panic. He doesn't hero call. He doesn't convince himself that ace-king high is good against one of the greatest players alive. He lets it go. Negreanu shows just one king, and the table starts side betting on what his other card is.
I had at least that. Come on, man. Come on, man.
Ace king?
Maybe, I don't know.
He had 2 kings. Come on. He had 2 kings.
What do you think I had, huh?
Did you show a card?
I showed a king.
I think you had ace king.
The loose cannon gives it up.
You did.
But Doyle picks up some spare change, and he didn't even play a hand yet.
That was an amateur on his first televised hand, laying down ace-king against pocket kings and not losing a single extra dollar. Doyle Brunson sits up in his chair. Hellmuth cocks an eyebrow. The pros at this table have already learned something important about Ernest Wiggins. He can play. A few hands later, Tony G opens from early position with ace-jack of diamonds. Wiggins, in the blinds, calls with king-queen. Before the flop even hits the felt, Tony G announces he's betting 2,000 in the dark.
I'm probably gonna quit in about 2 hands if I keep doing that.
Tony G raises to 1,000, ace-jack suited. Hellmuth folds. The loose cannon makes the call.
I'm calling a re-raise.
Daniel folds,
There you go, I'll give you a blind one, a couple.
as does Doyle.
Tony gambled, tossing out 2,000 in the dark.
You got a blind bet.
The flop comes king of spades, queen of spades, 5 of clubs. Wiggins has just flopped top 2 pair, and what he does next is the exact moment the table stops treating him like a loose cannon and starts treating him like an opponent. He shoves 86,500, almost his entire stack, first 15 minutes of the session.
And on Ernest, since Tony G bet in the dark.
I've hit that big.
I'm all in.
Wow!
You're all in?
I love it. I love this show.
I love you, baby!
Tony G's I'll give you a good 2,000 bet. How about this? Eat some of that, cuz. All of it. What?
Nah.
Do it to me. Just show me one card.
Nah.
I'll pay you if you show me one card. If I like it, I'll pay you. One card. Go on. I reckon you got like a nice high flush draw.
Okay, I reckon you to be wrong.
Yeah, you way wrong.
And Ernest shows the king.
Oh, I win.
I'm gonna lie on TV. That's my job.
He's a loose cannon, but he ain't that loose.
Ain't that loose, man?
I reckon you be wrong. That was an amateur from a Washington, D.C. home game in his first hour of televised poker, looking Tony G directly in the eye and telling him to his face that his read was garbage. Then showing him the king. The pot slides to Wiggins. The character is established, and somewhere across the table, Phil Hellmuth is starting to pay attention. The thing about Ernest Wiggins that's easy to miss is how unlikely any of this actually is. He didn't come up through the online poker boom, he didn't grind tournaments, he didn't study solvers or hand charts. He got into poker because his ex-girlfriend played it professionally. After they broke up, the game stuck. That's it. That's the entire backstory. And now he's sitting at a table with a combined 17 World Series of poker bracelets staring back at him, telling Tony G to his face that he had him read wrong. A few hands later, Wiggins gets a seat-of-the-house view of exactly what kind of war is going on at this table. Phil Hellmuth limps in for 400 with ace-5 of spades. Doyle Brunson, the Godfather, raised to 1,900 with pocket tens. Tony G defends the big blind with Jack-10 offsuit. And that's when Hellmuth, from outside the pot, decides to do the most Hellmuth thing possible.
You're discovering yourself.
I think most people lose their little Phil along with their baby teeth.
Lock folds.
Got the devil.
You got 100 there, Dal, or what?
It's got 100.
I should squeeze, really.
Squeeze.
I've never seen a guy squeeze after they make the announcement of this would be a good time to squeeze in 10 years of cards at this point.
I'm gonna do that move someday. You know?
Will you call 8 more?
I'll call 8 more.
If I make that announcement.
Will you call 10 more?
I think we're getting out of hand now. Let's just play the hand. Call the 15 or fold. That's your 2 options. If you're threatening, pull the trigger.
Remember, it is pot limit pre-flop.
These guys shouldn't talk about the squeeze with Doyle still in the hand, which, by the way, is just another raise after there's already been a raise and a call.
Decision time for Tony G.
I just want to be in a pot. I can't say no to this pot.
Remember everything I just said about Doyle having the right odds to call? Well, same thing for Tony G, except the exact opposite. This man clearly hates money.
No, he doesn't. How about trip jacks for Tony G? He bets 18,000. Tony G makes the smooth call.
Now you can move in. Be the hero.
$10,000 into a pot with ace-5 suited. Daniel Negreanu calls it a squeeze. I'd call it something else. The flop comes jack of diamonds, jack of clubs, 2 of hearts. Tony G, with his jack 10, has just flopped trips.
Check.
A check by Tony. Phil checks.
I'm sure Doyle thinks he's best here. The odds of flopping trips are less than 2%.
He bets 18,000. Tony G makes the smooth call.
Now you can move in. Be the hero.
More trickery from Tony G.
Actually, Phil moves out.
Before the turn card even hits the felt, Tony G announces he's moving all in the dark. 67,600 to Brunson.
I just don't believe you got it, buddy.
There he goes.
2 10s is very bad.
Bad.
You're drawing dead to 2 10s.
Oh, what a disgusting feeling.
Because you said 2 8s, I guess. No, you've got some chips.
That was a good read.
He's got like 70. How much you got?
I lost. No, I bluffed Phil. I'm going to wipe you out.
Keep sticking 8,400 in with Jack 10 offsuit when you're
I will do it.
I would have busted you, don't worry.
You would have busted me? You feel good. I love you.
You're so bad, you don't even understand it.
I'm so happy to be so bad.
So happy to be so lucky, too, I think.
Texas Dolly just got cracked for 100,000 with pocket 10s by a guy who called 10,000 pre-flop with Jack 10 offsuit. And Phil Hellmuth cannot hold it in. That's hand number 30-something of a brand new television show, and we've already gotten the first Hellmuth tantrum on tape. Meanwhile, Wiggins is still fighting his way back. After 32 hands, he's actually stuck about 13,000. He's not running over the table. He's not getting lucky. He's just playing his spots.
To keep any of the cash.
Ernest has 118 more hands to go, and these guys are not going to make it easy.
Multi-way pot after a raise and several calls pre-flop. Wiggins holding ace-queen, takes the lead and bets with ace-high. One customer in, the turn brings a flush draw for Wiggins. He checks and sees a free river. Lucky card there, which saves him the pot. That's almost $14,000 on their way to Wiggins' stack.
Bet of 2,000 gets Negreanu out of the way. A 9 of hearts on the turn.
Ernest has just hit one of the 2 hearts he needs to make the nut flush.
A check by E-Dub.
Ernest maybe could have won the hand right there, and he followed up with another bet.
Queen.
Ernest now has a pair of queens.
God did.
By the time we're about halfway through the session, something has started to shift at this table. Tony G is up almost 100,000. Hellmuth is stuck in his own head. Brunson's already rebought, and Wiggins, the loose cannon, the amateur, the guy nobody at the table took seriously an hour ago, has quietly clawed his way back from 13,000 in the red. The pros are watching him now. They've stopped trying to bluff him off marginal hands. They've stopped value betting him thin. They're being careful with this guy. All except one. This is the one. Let's watch. Several bets. Pre-flop, Wiggins awakes with a monster hand.
Objects.
No, of course.
I don't object.
Add on for as much as you like.
Suited connectors raises to 2,800.
Doyle all of a sudden coming to life, maybe trying to get a little hot streak going.
Phil lock folds. Haven't heard much from Tony G so far.
Tony G's had good luck with that hand in this game. On Monday night, he flopped trip jacks and raked in almost 200,000.
Ace-9 offsuit for the newly reformed Phil Hellmuth. A raise to 12,600. The loose cannon.
6, right?
Ooh, pair of cowboys.
If there's ever a time to re-raise, this is it.
12-6.
Yep.
Call.
But just a call.
We have some cannon action over here.
The money starts going in before the flop. Wiggins is ahead. Then the flop comes out.
The flop 9-10-9 trip nines for Hellmuth.
Phil has flopped the Hellmuth out of it. Our loose cannon Ernest is in big trouble if he can't get away from this, and honestly, Chris, I don't see how he'll be able to.
Tony G is checked on over to Phil Hellmuth.
That flop looks like you, doesn't it?
No, Phil, I look like me.
Nines on the flop. Phil Hellmuth just flop trips. Wiggins has pocket kings, an overpair, but an overpair that's now drawing to exactly 2 outs. Hellmuth bets, Wiggins raises, and from this point forward, Wiggins is an 85% dog. In statistical terms, this hand is over. In actual poker terms, Phil Hellmuth is about to double up through the loose cannon and put this session to bed in the most emphatic way possible.
I don't think I have a choice here. This is so sick. All right, I guess I'm all in.
I call. Kings.
I got 3 nines.
You gotta be kidding me. Okay, that's what I thought. Yeah,
What were you slow rolling him for?
Here, man.
Maybe he had 10s full. I mean, he was so happy.
The pot, sitting in the middle of the table, is approaching $200,000. A pot that, if this hand plays out statistically, is about to be Phil Hellmuth's. And then, because this is the big game, and because this is Phil Hellmuth, something ridiculous happens. He doesn't just want the chips, he wants the chips, and he wants to be nice about it.
Hold on. How many times do you want to deal it?
Oh, hey, thanks for asking me.
3 times?
Yeah, huh?
3 times?
Yeah, run it 3.
3 times.
3 times.
3 times.
Yeah, that'll
You
work.
might win one of those 3.
Gee whiz, man.
You want to deal it 4 times?
When you asked him, you're going to call if I go all in, and he said yes, what percentage of you didn't believe that he was given the straight dope there with that little bit left? Well, you're the...
He had 50,000 more. Did he have 50,000 more? You want to? I'll bet he had at least 40,000 more.
He put in
You want to bet?
36,000.
I'll bet he had 40 more before you count and look.
74,
What's the difference?
300,
How
right.
can he ever have that beat?
You want to deal it 4 times or what?
They agree to run it 4 times, 4 separate turn and river combinations, each one dealing out 25% of the pot. It's the maximum protection Phil Hellmuth can offer an amateur in this spot, and it's also a move that statistically he should be thrilled to make. He's 85% in each individual runout. The math says he wins the overwhelming majority of this pot, no matter how many times they deal the cards. Run it 1 time, and he wins almost 9 out of 10 times. Run it 4 times, and in over 55% of parallel universes, he scoops the entire pot. Turn and river, number 1.
So we'll see the turn and river 4 times with each pot worth a shade under 50 grand. Run number 1, a jack of hearts.
Queen, yeah, Queen, King.
The river, an ace of diamonds. Round 1 goes to Hellmuth.
Phil Hellmuth is filled up and made a full house. He's locked up at least 25% of this pot.
1-0 Hellmuth. Exactly as the math said it would go, a quarter of the pot slides to the poker brat. 3 runouts to go. Turn and river, number 2.
2, the turn, a king.
There we go. Full house. That's what I'm talking about, baby. Get me down.
If you're in it twice, you
Get
got
me
your money back.
down. Oh, damn, I said 4 times, though. Damn, didn't I? Holy snap. I got to stand back up now. I thought it was only twice. Come on.
The river's a 3.
15% dog. Ernest has won the second pot.
So that's cool. I'm feeling good right now.
1 all. A quarter of the pot back to Wiggins. Nothing unusual yet. 35% of the time, a 13.5% dog is going to win one of 2 coin flips. But the statistical window is starting to close. 2 runouts left, and Hellmuth needs to win at least one of them to lock up the majority of the pot. Turn and river, number 3.
Round 3, a 7 of spades.
Everybody's rooting for a spade.
He can now hit a king or a spade to win this run.
Get me down.
The river, it is a spade.
Damn.
Spade, up 2-1. That's loose cannon. He's up 2-1.
Why did you go for 4 times? You went for...
Hey, man, I'm just thinking of more outs, man.
Oh, this is like slow roll. One more time. One more time. Put a king ball out there.
Ernest Wiggins has now won half the pot.
This is the thing right here. This is it right here, man. This is like big action right here. Yeah?
Helmut loves you.
Yeah, I really like it.
2-1 Wiggins. The amateur from DC just won the majority of a $200,000 pot from the most decorated poker tournament player in history. And they still have 1 runout to go. The table is losing it. Phil Locke, the Unabomber, the clown, The guy who lives for exactly this kind of moment is leading the laughing section. Daniel Negreanu has his face in his hands. Tony G is howling, and Phil Hellmuth is saying nothing at all. One run out left.
The final run.
Ernest's odds continue to get worse and worse, but Phil looks sick anyway.
A queen on the turn.
Jack! There's a jack!
You want a jack? That would be
king.
sick.
King or a jack, one time. There's what, 3 jacks left?
Right now.
The final river card. It's a king!
That's real! He hit 3 out of 4! He hit 3 out of 4! That's with the worst hand! Why is everyone so happy except Phil?
3-1 Wiggins. 3 out of 4 runouts for the 13.5% underdog. The amateur who learned poker from his ex-girlfriend just won 75% of a $200,000 pot from Phil Hellmuth on the first episode of a brand new television show. And on one of those runouts, he rivered 4 of a kind. 4 kings. The statistical odds of the amateur winning 3 or more runouts in that exact spot, per an actual statistics textbook problem that uses this exact hand, is less than 1%. 0.88%, a 1 in 114 outcome.
If you do it once, you lose a whole lot. And every time you did it an extra time, you won a higher percentage of the pot. If you did it twice, 50%.
Phil deserved that, doing that with ace-9.
Tony, can you please shut up? Show some class. Show some class.
But the hand! You're a professional. You're not meant to play like that.
I thought he might have tons full. That's the way I think, okay?
No,
now you want to make fun of me?
You're
That's
a
fine.
professional. Ace-9, that's
You want to
worse
make
than
fun of me?
King
That's
Jack.
fine.
That's worse than King Jack.
When you got so excited, I thought maybe you flopped tons full. That's all. So I mean, these people, they
Would
don't.
have been better off.
These people, he's got it.
We got a they in! We're part of they again.
We're in the van.
Ask Doyle. Ask Doyle. I mean, this is the way I play poker. So
This is not a good move. What are you doing? You're putting 12% of your chips in.
I put in 74,000 like a 7-1 favorite. What do you want?
Daniel loves that.
That was so funny. Jeez.
You got quartered.
You get all that pretty money, buddy.
Hey, that's what's up, man.
Now you back in the black.
Here we go. Thank you, babe.
That is Phil Hellmuth, 17-time World Series of Poker bracelet winner, Poker Hall of Famer, the self-proclaimed best no-limit hold'em player of all time, losing a 75% majority of a $200,000 pot to an amateur he had never heard of, while the entire table laughs at him. After the dust settled, Ernest Wiggins finished the big game with a profit of $50,300, a little over half the money he started with, turned into pure take-home pay. Wiggins was the one who proved the concept. He was the reason the show worked.
It's my goal, but that is a lot, you know what I mean? And I make money, not excuses. I can't turn that down.
All right, Felicia, come out here and give your man a hug. All right, guys, I'm Amanda Leatherman saying goodbye for now.
Ernest Wiggins celebrating with his girlfriend Felicia Sharon, the infamous Rabbit, his poker teacher.
The hat? Oh, you got it. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. There we go. There we go. There we go.
Here we go.